President Trump is back on U.S. soil this morning after wrapping up an historic trip to the G20 Summit in Germany. The president calling it, quote, a wonderful success. Mr. Trump tackled a number of issues with the leaders of Russia, China, and South Korea. But Mr. Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin, well, it received the most attention. The president tweeted out this morning this: I strongly pressed President Putin twice about Russian meddling in our election. He vehemently denied it. I've already given my opinion. We negotiated a ceasefire in parts of Syria, which will save lives. The president goes on to say now it is time to move forward in working constructively with Russia. Joining me right now is Texas Congressman Michael McCaul, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee and a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, it's good to see you. Good morning.
Good morning, Maria. Thanks for having me.
Your reaction to the president's trip?
I thought overall it was very successful. He is a real leader on the world stage, presidential. I think the meeting with Putin was very, very historic and significant. You know, I asked the Obama administration many times when I got those briefings to call out Russia for what they were doing and Putin, and that there needed to be consequences. This is the first time I've seen a president do that, and he did it very early on in their meeting. He did it twice. Asked him, you know, why did you interfere in our elections? And, of course, Putin and the Russians, as they usually do, denied that happened. But it was important that the president bring up that issue because it is so important to the American people. And then they moved on to the other issues that are so important. That's Syria, Ukraine, and North Korea. And so I thought overall the president made a lot of great, successful outcomes.
Yeah, you were very vocal going into this trip that the president should bring it up. It was important to bring it up, to get this on the table, let the American people hear what Putin has to say about this. But let's talk about some of the other substance from that meeting, and including this ceasefire in parts of Syria that the two leaders agreed upon. How important is that?
I think hugely important. It's a first step forward towards cooperation with Russia to deconflict, to have a ceasefire in southwest Syria, to maybe actually move forward to finally defeating and destroying ISIS in Syria, which has posed such a threat to the homeland. And, of course, today the prime minister of Iraq was in Mosul declaring victory against ISIS. So I think this ceasefire will not only help us moving forward against ISIS in Syria, but also create a safe haven, if you will, a humanitarian angle to this with the refugee crisis that I think has been so tragic over the past couple of years.
Congressman, the Center for Economic Policy Research in London is reporting that the other 19 out of the G20 took a lot fewer steps against United States commercial entities in the first 6 months of the year. I mean things like quotas, duties, tariffs on imports from the U.S. All of these measures, that's down 29%. In the first half of the year. Do you think the president's tough talk as it relates to trade, as it relates to America first, is resonating across the world?
It is. In addition to his commitment to NATO and Article 5, you're seeing these countries step up to their 2% of GDP paying towards NATO. The trade talks, I think, have been effective now. And I'll tell you, Maria, where I think will be most effective is our ability to leverage China against North Korea. We do a lot of trade with China, but China does a lot of trade with North Korea. I think China is the linchpin in our success in dealing with what's happening with the ICBM capability coming out of North Korea. And I think these trade talks could provide the leverage to get to that point.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Several administrations before President Trump have tried to get China to agree to help rein in North Korea to no avail. And yet we did learn that trade between China and North Korea is actually up 40%. So do you think China is doing enough? What else should China be doing right now?
Well, they're not. And I think the president, again, you talk about the talks with Putin on Syria. The president met with the president of China, President Xi, to talk about North Korea and said that this is we're going to be successful on this endeavor one way or the other. And that was very strong diplomatic language that we're either going to end this diplomatically or we're going to end this militarily. And I think that was a very strong message. We don't want to see the military route. It would be very devastating. However, I think it's important that we have a military strategy and plan to force a diplomatic solution to this problem. And I think that China knows that we have a lot of leverage over them with respect to trade talks. And I hope that that's going to be where we can get them to cooperate with us. And they both agreed, both world leaders agreed on a denuclearized North Korea, which is a big step forward.
What can you tell us about the homeland right now? Should we be on alert in terms of attacks, in terms of the security within our borders?
Well, what's happening in the caliphate, so-called declared caliphate, is a noose is being tightened around ISIS. We just heard today, again, Prime Minister of Iraq declaring victory in Mosul. Raqqa will be the next one to fall. It will take months to get there. And as we defeat and destroy ISIS in the caliphate, they will scatter globally to where they came from. Scatter, like cockroaches across the globe. That is probably going to be the biggest threat to the homeland. As we annihilate them in the caliphate, they will go back to where they came from, Europe, try to get back into the United States. That is the real threat to the homeland. This is an internet global phenomenon, global jihadist, and it will not go away with the defeat of the caliphate. However, I watched for 5 years as President Obama did nothing to defeat and destroy ISIS, allow this expansion of the caliphate when nothing was done. I'm glad we have a president who has unleashed the shackles on our generals to finally get this piece done, because as long as they have controlled territory in a state, they can conduct external operations out of there into the United States, just like what we saw with this laptop device issue, turning them into explosive devices, putting them on airplanes. That's coming, right out of that region. And so the sooner we defeat them, the sooner we can stop that threat.
So will we see an expansion in terms of what is allowed on planes about a computer, given what you've learned in terms of how they're trying to attack us?
I think, the Secretary has dealt with this in a very threat-based reality, and I think he's done it very well. First, there are 10 last point departure airports. I think, it's all threat-based. If they can increase their security standards, we'll allow them to bring these devices on to these airports. And so, again, it's all threat-based. Yeah. But the sooner we take out ISIS in Syria, the less of a threat that is.
Congressman, the president obviously is having success on these foreign trips that we're talking about. This most recent G20 included. What about the domestic agenda, Congressman? I mean, we're waiting on health care out of the Senate. Obviously, your colleagues in the House had a long back and forth in terms of getting that bill out. And then the American people want to see tax reform this year. Do you believe the president will be successful on the domestic agenda?
Well, we have to be. I mean, we all ran and campaigned on this. If we can't, repeal and replace Obamacare and have health care reform, like what we passed out of the House, if the Senate can't achieve that, then we don't deserve to be reelected. And I think the fact is we have to get that done. And when we get that done, and I hope by the August recess, we will accomplish that, and then take up bold tax reform in September.
Sounds like you're expecting big things in the next couple of weeks, Congressman.
Well, I'm the eternal optimist, and I have to say I want to get this done. It's the right thing for the American people. Bold tax reform will prime this economy like we've never seen before. The biggest tax cuts since Reagan, if not bigger. And that's what we want to achieve as Republicans, not just for our party, but for the American people overall, and to lift our lifestyle and way of living.
For sure. Congressman, it's good to see you. Thanks so much for weighing in this morning.
Thanks so much, Maria.
We will be following.